I deleted my boyfriend's RUNESCAPE account because he cheated on me, or more accurately, I destroyed the account. I took all the effort he put into that account over the last 14 years and the billions of gold that he had in it and flushed it down the toilet. When he discovered that he just lost 14 years of work in the game, he lost it. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. My boyfriend and I had met online well over 6 years ago through an online game by the name of RuneScape. He was 14 and I was 17, but it had felt like we had been friends forever. We both played the game very often and connected through it, eventually leading us to starting a long-distance relationship. Things began to escalate as the years went on, and we began seeing each other in person every few months or so. We were about 1,500 miles apart, so one of our main priorities for the future was moving in together and closing the distance. My job had prevented us from doing that, but we had finally set a date for me to move in with him in December of this year. Our relationship never had any serious issues, and I was more than happy to have him in my life as he was happy to have me. As I got older, I began to play RuneScape less and less, as work took up most of my time. He continued to play regularly, if not more than he had when I first met him. He could never really hold down a job and barely had an income, but I supported him throughout the years and even paid his rent from across the country after he moved out of his parents' house a few years ago. I never really minded it because he was a sweetheart, but we began to have problems. In November of last year, I couldn't help pay his monthly rent. I was short on cash after having to pay my own living expenses alongside car repairs and bills I owed to the state, and I just couldn't afford to support him at the time. When I called him one night to discuss it, he freaked out and started crying that he didn't want to live with his parents again. I tried calming him down and even suggested that I could help him find a temporary job until I could start providing for him again, but he wasn't having it. He claimed his parents would terrorize him if he returned home, hurt him, which I know for a fact isn't true because him and his parents have stayed with me several times. They've given him the world. I eventually did calm him down, but he remained passive aggressive the entire night, but we eventually hung up. Because I cared about him, I reached out to his father the next day and informed him that he would probably be moving back home after his lease expired that month. I explained how I wouldn't be able to afford paying for his living for a month or two, and if there were any local jobs he could work in order to, make an income. Apparently, a friend of his father needed help managing a small warehouse for his business and was looking to potentially hire my boyfriend for the season. It paid $15 an hour and was super easy, lifting boxes, sweeping the floors, and taking inventory. I brought it up to my boyfriend that same night and he was not having it. Not only did he not want to work in a quote crappy warehouse, but he didn't want to work at all. All he planned to do day in, day out was play RuneScape. I brought up a few other job listings I had found in his area and he immediately shot all of them down as well. He then had the audacity to comment about how he thinks I should work harder and possibly work a second job. I kept my composure and simply argued against it until we eventually hung up. I collapsed on my bed and cried for a good hour or two afterwards because of the intense emotional stress that I was under. Not only do I work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, I'm also an industrial meteorologist. If I remember correctly, that's a lot more work than playing RuneScape every day and using my Hulu account. I really considered breaking up with him right at that moment, but I changed my mind and decided to give him another chance. Looking back on it, big mistake. I messaged him throughout the night and we sort of made up, but I was still a little uneasy about the entire event. He had moved back with his parents by the time December had come, and I began to help him look for jobs while he wasted his life away playing video games. I eventually persuaded him to start working at a small retail store near his house, and he thankfully began to make some money. I would still buy him video games and transfer him money like normal because I spoiled him, and our relationship began to feel somewhat okay again. Last month, both him and I put our money together to fly him across the US to stay with me for 4 days. We hadn't seen each other in person since last summer, so we were both looking forward to it. He arrived and we had a great time for the first few days because he could actually take me on dates for once with his new income. Everything was perfect until I caught a glimpse of his phone's lock screen while he was taking a shower. "When are you gonna leave her?" the Discord message read with 5 R's on the word her. I could have ran into the bathroom and snapped his neck in that moment, but I kept myself together as best I could without ending him. I never have felt so used, disrespected, or hated in my entire life. When he came out of the bathroom, I gave him a fake smile, but I genuinely hated him from that moment on. He could have dropped dead on the floor and I I would have spit on him. I spent the remainder of the night watching him play RuneScape, and I remained very quiet. He took notice of this and asked me if everything was okay. I lied and told him I was fine. When it came time to go to sleep, I let that jerk climb into bed with me, and he tried to initiate doing the deed because it was our final night together. I rejected as politely as I could without tearing his member completely off. He was disappointed but went out like a light. Immediately after he went to sleep, I reached over and unplugged his phone and started digging through his messages with that girl. I feared I had misinterpreted the message I had seen, but I was completely right after all. Not only had he been cheating on me, he had been doing so for nearly 6 months, leading me to believe that he hooked up with another girl directly after I couldn't pay for his living in November. I scrolled through probably 100,000 messages and wanted to vomit my insides out by the end of it. He had talked trash about me, claimed I was emotionally abusive, just as he had done with his parents, and even sent this girl my private photos so that they could pick me apart physically together. When morning came, I had slept in because of how late I was up reading his messages. I woke up to find him on my computer playing RuneScape and eating my food. It was like all of our relationship had been wiped from my mind, and he was now an evil stranger sitting in my house. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tear him apart and kick him out of my house and onto the street, but I didn't. In fact, I gave him as much love and attention as I could muster that morning because I wanted to leave things feeling normal between us. I dropped him off at the airport and we had a quick and somber goodbye before I left him forever, unbeknownst to him. I drove back home as calmly as I could before crying my eyes out in a mix of complete anger and emotional pain. I ended up kicking my bed frame so hard that the wood split and I had to buy another one recently. If only it were his face. I wanted to break his heart by the time I arrived back home, but I wanted it to really hurt. I logged into our joint RuneScape account that we had made several years ago, where him and I would work on training the same account and raising it almost like our baby. We had always joked that if we were ever to split up, he would take half of the account's bank contents and I would take the rest. I took my half and transferred it into my main account before taking his half and giving it away to random people throughout the game. Every last bit of it. Even items I couldn't normally trade away. I used a spell to convert the items into coins, which I then gave away as well. The bank was now empty. It then occurred to me that I had the credentials to his main account. They were written down on my desk, as he would frequently have me train his farming skill every so often. I didn't hesitate at all and logged into his precious 14-year-old RuneScape account, and I immediately took out all of the contents of his bank and sold it all on the Grand Exchange, a marketplace in the game. It took an extremely long time to clear out his bank, but he would still be flying home for about another 4 hours, so I had plenty of time. By the time I had sold/destroyed everything, I had 4 stacks of coins totaling over 8.5 billion. Now, what to spend it on? I wanted to waste his life earnings on the most useless, stupid thing I could think of besides him. I logged back into my main account to reach out to a friend of mine that collects massive stacks of burnt food. For the unaware, burnt food in RuneScape has no use. You can't unburn them, eat them, or even sell them on the Grand Exchange. They are, however, tradable amongst players. I've always poked fun at this guy for collecting burnt food, but I was now more thankful than ever to make his acquaintance in my revenge. I asked him what the most obscure, unwanted item was of the burnt food variety, and he replied, burnt spider. Lo and behold, he had roughly 6,000 of that item. Spider on a shaft, burnt is what it was called. The 6,000 of those in his bank, he was willing to sell me. Feeling generous with my ex-boyfriend's coins, I gave my friend the full stack of 2.147 billion coins and left a very happy customer. I dropped the 6,083 burnt spiders in his bank, but still had about 6 billion coins left to spend. With my remaining money, I decided to treat myself. I went onto the Grand Exchange and ended up going on a shopping spree. The first thing I bought were 100 bonds. If you're not familiar, a bond in RuneScape grants you 14 days of in-game membership. After trading all my 100 bonds to my account, I now have almost 4 years membership paid for me. I spent a majority of his coins on extremely nice armor and weapons, all of which went straight into my account. He still had about an extra billion, so I spent it on the supplies I needed to level up an expensive skill of mine. By the end of the afternoon, he was left with a measly 150,000 coins in his bank. all of which I gave away to a guy cooking pizzas outside of the exchange. Nothing was left. So I decided to pick up a pile of bones off the ground and leave it solely in his bank. It might sound petty, but I laughed for a while. Now I know what you're thinking. This is so cruel. You ruined tens of thousands of hours that he had put into a game. Well, it was time he learned that I can be a bee, a mean bee. On top of spending every last coin he had ever made, I leveled up his defense skill. That might not sound bad. In fact, it sounds like a good thing. I helped his account progress, right? Well, no. Unfortunately for my ex, he had what players commonly refer to as a pure account, meaning he never ever dared to level his defense skill from level 1 in order to keep the lowest defense stats but have high offensive stats. Well, not anymore. Have fun with your permanent level 6 defense. Cycling through hundreds of possible forms of revenge in my head, I settled on getting rid of his house. It's quite an achievement in RuneScape to have a nice house of your own. In fact, he had one of the nicest I had ever seen in the game. In order to have built it, he must have spent well over a few billion coins. Too bad I had disassembled it all in a matter of minutes, deleting it all into cyberspace. And there's no insurance either. He's going to have to rebuy everything with his non-existent money if he wants to buy a new house. Bye bye, Casa de Cheater. Scrolling through his friends list, I decided to act as him and pay a visit to his friends who were currently online and admit that I had cheated on my girlfriend and was fully proud of it. If his friends hadn't removed him by that point, I removed them. All of them. Lastly, to add a beautiful little cherry to this revenge-filled cake, I changed his username. You're able to change your username once a month on RuneScape, so I changed his to let everyone know that he's a dirty cheater. I obviously won't drop his username here, but I did the best I could to embarrass him with a 12-character limit. He should be able to reclaim his previous username in about 3 weeks, but if he waits too long, I'll be able to swipe it and slap it on a throwaway account of my own forever. When he found out, he sent me a very hateful and aggressive message later that night, followed by pictures of him crying. I wrote him a sincere message officially ending the relationship, while also scaring him away by threatening to take him to court over sharing my private photos and possibly filing a cease and desist if he were to contact me anytime soon. I don't plan on doing any of that, I just don't want to speak to him ever again. So, am I the jerk? This was truly a scorched earth revenge. You might not think so because RuneScape is just a game, but this is obviously what this guy cared about the most for the last 14 years. I mean, he was even playing it while he was cross-country in the OP's house and kept playing it when he thought something was wrong because she was silent. That pretty much speaks to how much he valued this game and all the progress he had made over the last 14 years. I think the thing that probably twists the knife the most out of all of this is the fact that she made his defense level 6. So it's not even like he has a ton of defense anymore, he's just not pure anymore. I don't play RuneScape at all, but I understand what she's saying here. That's gotta be an excruciating thing to look at when you've had the account pure for so long. Because you probably get a lot of props for having a level 1 defense skill, I'm assuming, but nobody's gonna care if you're level 6. In other words, it sounds like it's probably not strong enough to matter, but it's not low enough that anyone's gonna give you props for it, which I assume is the only reason why you would do that. If you guys play RuneScape, you can let me know down below. And lastly, if she could convert these into bonds, she could have just converted everything into bonds and then just given herself even more years of free RuneScape, but I think she just wanted to get creative with this revenge, and she doesn't really sound like she plays RuneScape anymore, so 4 years itself is probably more than she'll ever use of the playtime that she'll get from the bonds. And if this all seems like it doesn't mean anything to you, just imagine this was the thing that you cared about the most in your life, and somebody went and did all of this. I do feel really bad for the OP because she's obviously really hurt by this and betrayed and had wasted a lot of time by this guy not just being upfront and telling her that he was doing this behind her back. But let me know your thoughts on this whole situation. Do you think this revenge was too far, destroying 14 years of progress on his RuneScape account, or was it justified? Jerk or not a jerk, and why? Before we jump into the next story, if you haven't already, you can join the Discord via the link down below in the description. Am I the jerk for pointing at the kitchen when my mother-in-law asked, "Where's our dinner?" My husband had a serious injury weeks ago. He's bedridden and his family comes to see him every day. My mother-in-law keeps drilling what I need to do to make my husband comfortable, but does nothing to help. She She just visits every day and sits around expecting to be fed and entertained. Sometimes brother-in-law, his wife, and kids join them and turn the house into a mess. Yesterday, my mother-in-law, her husband, and son came again. They checked on my husband, then went to sit in the living room for hours. I served them coffee and a croissant. Hours later, my husband threw up again. The second time, I had to take care of changing his clothes and cleaning the sheets to avoid infections. I was exhausted. I came downstairs and my mother-in-law looked at me and said, "Hey, where's our dinner?" I was shocked that after seeing me go up and downstairs so many times and cleaning and bringing new sheets and running around trying to go into the washing machine, that she'd expect me to prepare dinner. I'd already eaten a sandwich at 6 and yogurt. I have problems with my stomach and stress in pregnancy made it worse. I'm 4 months in. I pointed at the kitchen and told her to help herself out. She gave me a look, then said she didn't expect me to ask her to cook dinner in my house. I said I didn't expect her to ask me to cook dinner while I'm taking care of her son. She started arguing about the way I spoke about my husband, saying as his partner this is the least I could do, and called me unhinged for throwing in her face that I'm helping my husband. She got her husband involved, asking what his thoughts were on me making guests go hungry and forcing them to cook for themselves when this is supposed to be my duty as a host and homeowner. My father-in-law said that they could order food and call it a day, and he yelled at my younger brother-in-law to stop playing on his phone and order food, but my mother-in-law got mad and lashed out, criticizing me, saying that I wasn't up to the challenge of taking care of my home and my guests like an adult. I lost it on her and told them to leave since she kept yelling, disrupting my husband's sleep. She left after, saying she felt sorry for her son and grandbaby. With an aggressive wife and mother like me, she told everyone, and my older brother-in-law said he understood I had a lot on my plate, but lectured me about how I should have respect for his mom who was a guest, repeatedly saying if that was his wife, she wouldn't have acted this way, and that I shouldn't use taking care of my husband against them. He asked me to apologize, but I didn't. For more information on my husband, he suffers from 2 major injuries and he's got a long recovery ahead. Right now, there's so much pressure to take care of him while keeping up with house chores and work. My mom and sister help out, but not my mother-in-law. She claimed that when I told them to leave, I was refusing to let her see her sick son, but I'd never do that. I lost a loved one before seeing them, so I understand her fear, but my brother-in-law thought that that was my goal. And for the record, I live in the United States in the South. Am I the jerk? It's hard to imagine the family being so oblivious that they would just come into the living room and sit there, seeing that she's doing all this stuff and still demand a meal. I think the more normal, obvious thing would be to try and offer help and say, hey, how about we make you a meal? How about we try and help you out? Maybe they perceive the situation being something that wouldn't overwhelm them or stress them out, but they can clearly see that the wife here, the OP, is in fact stressed out and overwhelmed, even if they wouldn't be in this situation, or at least that's what they would think. So rather than trying to start arguments and complain about why there's not food being served to them while the husband is sick, they should just help out. I'm guessing the OP included that little fact about this taking place in the South for a reason, I guess to imply that maybe this is not the culture of the South, maybe it's more normal to still serve guests even though you have all this other stuff going on. But even looking past that, it seems obvious that she just needs help in this situation. So let me know how you would handle the situation if you were the OP and this was your family and this was the argument that you were in, and of course, jerk or not a jerk, and why. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories in this series, use the playlist at the top of the description. And next time you live stream, use the cream of the crop music. Search for Cream of the Stream on Spotify or whatever music platform you use for copyright-free music to use for your stream. It's free, Cream of the Stream. Either way, thanks a lot for listening. We'll see you guys next time.